Let's talk about the Samsung Galaxy Tab S6.
Yeah.
This is Geek Therapy Radio.
What are we waiting for?
And now your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger.
In somewhat of a puzzling move in this day and age, Samsung has deemed it necessary. Well, necessary. They're being brave, perhaps, in releasing a new Android tablet, a new high-end Android tablet. The marketplace for Android tablets is shrinking by the year. There's not much of a marketplace for Android tablets, especially high-end Android tablets. It's not something that I like. It's not a trend that I agree with, because I do personally like Android tablets. But let's face the facts here. If you're buying a tablet, most people are buying an iPad. You know what? For better or for worse, if you agree with it or disagree with it, if you hate Apple or love Apple, when you think of a tablet, most people think of an iPad, and most people buy an iPad when they are buying a tablet. So, while I am happy to see Samsung releasing a new Galaxy Tab S6, and for those keeping score, we went from the Galaxy Tab S4 to the Tab S5e, whatever that, why didn't they just release a 5? Anyways, to the Galaxy Tab S6. So let's go over the highs and woes of the Galaxy Tab S6, or the woes and cons. Let's just go over the specs. Snapdragon 855, that's a current gen flagship processor. Yes, there's the 855 Plus that exists in gaming smartphones and things like that, but it's Snapdragon 855. That's a really good processor. That's thumbs up so far. We're into one item of the specs. So far, thumbs up for the Tab S6. You get your choice of 6 or 8 gigabytes of RAM, 128 gigs or 256 gigs of internal storage. Of course, it's SD or micro SD expandable. For the first time ever in an Android tablet, you have an in-screen fingerprint reader straight out of the S10 smartphone. You have a dual lens rear camera, and supposedly it's pretty good. I think it's something like 14 megapixels. I'll put a little asterisk down here for what the actual count is. But it's a decent rear camera for a tablet. Why you'd want to be snapping pictures? Don't be that dude at the concert taking pictures of the stage with your friggin' tablet, iPad, or Samsung or otherwise. Just use your phone like a normal person. Anyway, so good rear camera. 10.5-inch screen at 2560 by 1600. It's a Super AMOLED affair with tiny, almost non-existent bezels, like every other handheld device these days. Bezels is a bad word, apparently. Even though I can understand no bezels with a smartphone. Quick little side note here. I can understand no bezels with a smartphone where you hold it in one hand, but with a tablet, you have to pinch it somewhere. You can't just grab around both sides. You need to pinch it somewhere. So I was perfectly cool with, I don't have my iPad here, but it has my iPad 9.7-inch, whatever, base model iPad has a little bezel around it, and it's perfect for pinching it on the edges, holding it. So tiny bezels on a tablet doesn't make sense, because you're going to have to put your fingers on the screen or hold it a different way to not put your fingers on the screen. It needs a little lip on it, I think, for a tablet to be most useful to be held in one hand at least. But let's move on. Maybe I'm nitpicking there. Do you agree or disagree? If you're watching on YouTube, let me know in the comments below. 4 AKG speakers with Dolby Atmos. That's neat. No headphone jack. And I put a little asterisk by this on my notes here. We're going to come back to that. No headphone jack on the new Galaxy Tab S6. You do have a USB-C port, and that's the only port you have other than the little dock connector underneath for the keyboard folio covers and stuff. It is thinner than the iPad Pro, coming in at 5.7 millimeters or 0.2 freedom inches. It weighs 420 grams. And comes with the S Pen, and it sticks magnetically to the back and has wireless and charges wirelessly. The S Pen charges wirelessly. That is. S Pen's neat. That's cool. Is it better than the Apple Pencil? Debatable. It's two separate, entirely different brands, and well, not two separately entirely different uses, but I'll leave it up to the consumer, up to you, whether the S Pen or the Apple Pencil's better. If you somehow have experience with both. I like the S Pen, though. It's on my Note 9. I do really like having the S Pen to jot down quick little notes and do other little gestures on my phone. So I like the S Pen. It's a nice thing. Anyways, moving on from the S Pen, the book cover keyboard, it's separate and it costs $180. It does not come with the Galaxy Tab S6. It has a trackpad, which is nice for Dex mode. And speaking of Dex mode, it's an improved Dex mode. Capital D, lowercase e, capital X for a more PC-like experience. So that's why I would have a trackpad. Because yes, on Android tablets, you can pair it with a Bluetooth mouse. That's been a thing forever. Shots fired at Apple. No, Apple mouse support isn't real mouse support yet. Yes, in the tablet OS or iPad OS, whatever. It's an accessibility thing. It's meant if you're disabled, you can actually use a thing that mimics a finger touching that pairs with a mouse, an actual mouse, but it's not a real mouse. It's not real mouse support. And the Galaxy and Android tablets, it is a real mouse in every respect. Both models will be configurable with either Wi-Fi and cellular is available for your 5G or 4G LTE. The Wi-Fi models come out first, however. They go on sale September 6th. And they start at, the Galaxy Tab S6 starts at $650 with 6 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigs of storage, up to $730 for 8 gigabytes of RAM, which still to me seems overkill in a tablet. I think the iPad Pro has maximum 6 gigabytes of RAM. But you get 8 gigs in the Galaxy Tab S6 and 256 gigabytes of storage for $730. So $650 up to $730. Remember, that keyboard cover costs an additional $180, $179. Let's call it $180. So the cheapest setup, let's go over the specs, the asterisks I put by the specs here. So first we'll start with the Snapdragon 855. I'm glad they're using a modern flagship processor in a tablet. So many tablets... You would think that a tablet would be able to, could very much use flagship SoC, system on chips. Why would the Note 9 have the Snapdragon 845 or 855 in it, while the Tab S6 would have a old 835 or even less than that, a 600 series? A lot of tablets seem to do that. They use the lower end CPUs in there, and it doesn't make sense to me. I know it's about cost and everything like that, but anyways, happy to see the Snapdragon 855. No headphone jack. That is going to be a huge turnoff for most people, including myself, even though, for the most part, here's the kind of weird thing about it. For the most part, I use Bluetooth. With my iPad, which has a headphone jack, iPads have not gotten rid of the headphone jack yet in a weird twist alternate universe that we live in. But I use Bluetooth headphones most of the time with the iPad, and I use Bluetooth headphones most of the time with my Note 9 that does have a headphone jack in it still. That said, I like having the headphone jack there available. And a lot of people, I don't want to say most people, but a ton of people, that's a big bummer not to have the headphone jack, as a ton of people still use the headphone jack in a media consumption device. Let's not beat around the bush here. A tablet, for all intents and purposes, even the iPad Pro, you can roast me on the coals for this, is still mostly a media consumption device. Yes, you can do some creative tasks, productivity tasks on it, but not beating around the bush. You're mostly watching YouTube and surfing the web and checking emails with a tablet, whether it's an iPad or an Android. So no headphone jack. That's stupid. Why? It's a tablet. I understand on a phone where space is at a premium. I can digest that. Why you would exclude a headphone jack from a massive tablet makes no sense. All right, the next asterisk is the starting price, and we're going to go over to kind of the prices and things. And this falls into the Woes, the WOES, Woes. Like, what are you thinking with this? I mean, I don't understand its place in the market here. But we'll get into that because there's pros and cons and things to this. So $650 gets you in the door with the Galaxy Tab S6 on September 6th. The keyboard covers an additional $180. So the cheapest setup that includes a keyboard to make this a good productivity tablet in addition to content consumption And if you're spending this much money on a tablet, I would expect that you would probably want to do some productivity with it, so you would be getting the keyboard. So the cheapest setup that includes a keyboard is $830. $830. Let's see what you can get on the Windows side for $830. And I'll just mention real quick, the cheapest point of entry for where is it? The iPad Pro 11-inch starts at $720 plus $180 for the Smart Folio. So going in that cheapest point of entry, including a keyboard in the iPad universe, iPad Pro universe, is $900. So yes, $830 in the door for Galaxy Tab S is $70 cheaper. So it just kind of, at that point, it's just whether you like Android better or do you like Apple better. What operating system do you like more? Which are you more invested in? You know, $70 isn't splitting hairs, but at the same time, the Android S6 is technically cheaper than the cost of entry at the iPad Pro that's going up against. So it's cheaper. It's cheaper. But let's see what you get on the Windows side. This is the big thing for me. So cheapest setup with an S6 and keyboard is $830. On the Windows side, you can get a Surface Go, a good Surface Go, plus the $100 Surface Go keyboard for $600. So the Surface Go is $500, the keyboard $600. The Surface Go you would get would be the dual-core Pentium, the 4415Y, dual-core, 4 threads, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and 128 gigs of storage. That's similar to what you get in the S6. You get up to 8 gigs on the S6 and 128 gigs of storage entry level. So that's about similar, but it's $600. That is $230 cheaper than the S6. Plus you can actually, I don't want to say edit, you can edit video on a pinch for sure on a Surface Go. In a pinch you can 1080. It's absolutely possible. You can absolutely photo edit on a Surface Go. Dual core, 4 threads, 8 gigs of RAM, 128 of solid state storage. That'll get you going. That's way better for productivity. You still get the 9 to 10 hours of battery life there. It's a tablet without the keyboard attached to it. The Surface Go is. Is it as intuitive as an iPad or Android operating system? No. But for me, that's a huge thing. $230 less or what have you for something that you can do real work with. If I'm carrying around something of that form factor, me personally, I would rather carry around something that is able to do the real work. So, and it's over $200 cheaper for that setup. But let's step it up. There's some wiggle room there between $830 for the S6 and the keyboard. There's some wiggle room there, that $230. Let's jump up to the Surface Pro 6 that comes with, at least according to Micro Center, a type cover. The Surface Pro 6, not the Go. The Surface Pro 6 plus type cover comes in at $750, again, according to Micro Center here. The Surface Pro 6 entry level gets you the Core i5 8250U. It's a 1.6 gigahertz quad core 8-thread processor, also 8 gigabytes of RAM, and the 128 gigabyte solid state drive. That's $750. That's still $180 or so. Or no, that's $80 less than the entry point for the Galaxy Tab S6. So the Surface Pro 6 plus type cover, $750. That's $80 less than entry level for the Android-based tablet. To me personally, it doesn't seem like much of a contest there. I want what's going to actually do real grunt work. And that i5, that 8250U, is way better for video editing. Way better. You could load up Premiere on there. You could load up Sony Vegas, which is what I use, and do real work on it. Is it going to be as fast as a gaming laptop or a dedicated desktop workstation? No, absolutely not. But you can still do real work on the go with that and be $80 cheaper than the Galaxy Tab S6. The most expensive Galaxy Tab S6 Plus keyboard is going to come in at $910. Remember, going back to the iPad Pro, the cost of entry for the iPad Pro with a keyboard is $900. So the most expensive Tab S6 is $10 more than the cheapest iPad Pro with a keyboard. It all comes down to what you want and what you value. For me personally, if I'm spending around, if the cost of entry for the Tab S6 is $830 with a keyboard, I'm going for that Surface Go or the Surface Pro 6 at $750. It's cheaper. It's going to do real work. And that brings me all the way around to this. This is kind of the main point of all of this, not just the specs of the Galaxy Tab S6, but the main point of this. And the reason why, Andrew, there is a reason why Android tablets are virtually dead, at least in the Pro sector. Because why? You're spending all this money when if you could go to Windows side of tablets, you can do real work, real productivity, real grunt work tasks with a real computer. What's a computer? Speaking of Apple, if you have an affinity for Apple, if you're invested in the Apple universe, I love Android personally. I don't have an iPhone. I have an iPad, so I know the Apple iOS, everything like that. I prefer Android myself, but it's just, the Tab S6 is just too expensive for what this thing is going to be. Mostly a content consumption device. Mostly consumption. And if I'm going to be doing mostly consuming, I might as well just keep the iPad. And that's just it. So it all boils down to what you want. Is there a place in this universe for something like the Galaxy Tab S6, a flagship Android tablet? What do you think? If you're watching on YouTube, let me know in the comments below. Just what do you think of all this in general? Thanks for listening to Midweek Geek. If you're just listening to the podcast, I implore you to go subscribe to Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube so you can see what I'm talking about. I very much appreciate it. I appreciate everyone who hits that sub button. You don't have to hit the bell icon, but I would appreciate it if you do. You know, I can't ask you to do that, but if you want to do that, that's cool. Thanks for tuning in, however you listen to this content, view this content, and I'll see you next week for more Midweek Geek. Take care, everybody.